I think we're live now,
Shit.
Tara. Tara,
Yeah.
let's
Right
go
now.
there.
Oh, on YouTube we're live.
Yeah, on YouTube, but Instagram.
Wake up. Okay.
Hold on.
Oh, I did it. Okay. Great. I get to see that again. Okay.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Hey everyone. It's Ellie.
And Tara. And okay, we're still just getting started.
That's fine. It's okay. We'll just continue going on. But for those of you who are on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. You can find us on all of our socials at 180shift.org, or just that's our website. I just mixed that up. It's been a long day, guys. Okay.
It sure
I went
has.
to some crazy places today.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Wait. Okay, I'm Tara, but can you tell us about the crazy places you went to today?
Okay. So today I went to the UCLA campus, and do you know what's been going on, Tara?
Who doesn't know what's been going on? They're burning
Well,
down their Disneylands.
You know what? I asked somebody today I was going to the UCLA campus, and then they were like, well, I don't know what's going on. I'm like, how could you not? I'm just kidding. But, like, if you haven't been on, I guess, the news lately,
or
there
social
was,
media.
yeah, or social media. There was an encampment, there is at the very moment, an encampment of pro-Palestine people. So they've set up shop there, tents and everything.
Yep.
It is crazy.
Arrests.
Yeah, at some campuses, yes. It's been crazy enough that USC has now canceled their graduation ceremonies, which is crazy. But let me tell you about my experience, Tara.
Yeah.
Okay. So security was very interesting when I got there. Okay. You had to go into the actual encampment. You would actually have to be vetted by somebody who's already been there, or by some like Palestine, like, I don't know, creator of the event. It was very interesting. People who even were having, like, they had flags, scarves draped around them. They weren't even let in. It was like this whole entire process that they had down. You were given bracelets. There was a bracelet, different one for each day. Today was a rainbow colored one.
Nice.
And there was a code of conduct before stepping in. They had briefed people saying you cannot, like, there was obviously no smoking, no alcohol, those things like that.
That's surprising.
You had to have masks on at all times. Okay. So these masks had to be kept on, so I guess since they were all in close proximity, that they wouldn't get sick. And another
in case they get arrested.
Yeah. Well, there's another one.
Or their friends get arrested.
Is no talking to media. Okay. So they had specific media liaisons. But when I was trying to talk to these people, I kept on getting like the runaround where they sent me to across the campus and back, then to the other side, and it was the most craziest thing. But
it's like, way to fight the fake news, guys.
I could not get an interview for the life of me, but I did get a couple.
Yeah.
And another thing was they had a medic tent inside, food, supplies, everything, even a painting tent. So if you guys wanted to paint, you can go and paint.
Was there a cuddle tent in case you wanted to go cuddle?
I don't know. A cry tent, a scream tent, I don't know. Something.
Party.
Now, one of the interesting things was that when they were giving the brief to the people who were going to go inside, they were given a phone number to give to one of their friends in case they got arrested, so they could call. There was a specific phone number given to them, which was very interesting.
It's funny because it's like the bureaucracy reminds me of colonialism. The whole thing they're standing against, right?
Oh my goodness.
Get into that line, get into that district, check in with him.
Right. It was such an interesting thing, and people came to drop off supplies, strawberries, water, anything you could think of. There's people dropping off stuff, ice I saw, but it was really interesting. And then I saw a few of the class people going to classes, so students, and they had to go around the encampment, and they were so frustrated. They were like, I have to go around. So they were not excited about what was happening.
They weren't excited about the colonialism that was being displayed on the campus.
Oh my goodness.
So
yeah,
that is awesome.
But that is just
that is
my
fantastic.
breakdown. I'll be posting some stuff later on.
Yes, I have to see that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So those are going to be posted on our 180 Shift Instagram and TikTok. But today is a very special day because we have two wonderful guests. We have Luke, who I met at a Turning Point event, and we have our Arden's brother, Phillip.
which
Yes, absolutely. It's an honor and pleasure. You betcha. So
Yeah.
glad to be here.
we did have your sister on. I think at the beginning of the year.
We
yeah.
love that podcast.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
It was
Arden,
amazing.
she was amazing, but glad to have you on.
so
as
much
well.
insight.
She's been doing incredible work. I couldn't be more proud of her.
Oh, I know.
So-
Yeah, yeah. She's been on all the big ones. It's all the big sites. She's doing well. It's good though because it means that she's been really getting the message out there, and
Yes.
she has so much insight. I highly recommend going back and watching our podcast with her because it was just amazing talking to her. Right,
Yes.
Ellie? It was just like
Yep.
wow.
You learned a lot of stuff.
But Luke, I actually have a mutual friend with Luke, and his name is Johnny. And I think we're both wearing Johnny's merch right
yeah,
now.
I got his hat on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's on the back, but Just Pray. I love that.
RuthlessAmericans.com. Check it out.
RuthlessAmericans.com. Yes,
on.
they have amazing stuff there. We have some cups too. My kids have some little teddy bears with the same design.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
awesome.
Cute.
RuthlessAmericans.com. And we're hopefully going to have Johnny here, I think, 2 weeks from now. So that'll be exciting.
Cool.
But yeah, Luke, give us some insight. What were you doing at that Turning Point event on when I met you?
Yeah, so it's actually it was an event that I put on with a partnership of a organization focused on ending human trafficking and child sexual exploitation. So we essentially just put on a walk to increase awareness, to spread awareness around just that, around human trafficking and sexual exploitation of children.
Yeah.
I think it's a topic that I don't think is intentionally ignored. I think it's kind of like a accidental ignorance.
Yeah.
But we just don't pay a lot of attention to it, especially I think in, some of these higher income areas because we think like, there's no crime, none of this happens. We kind of just pretend that it doesn't happen. But those are the areas that we're actually seeing a higher number of these cases than some of the lower communities. So that was kind of my goal, was just to wake up my city specifically. It's a bit of a smaller city, so it's very easy to get caught up in, the mentality of nothing happens here. Like we just live in this little town. Everybody's safe. But there's actually a lot of cases that happen in our city that I didn't even know about.
Yeah.
So it was cool to see like people, I don't know if cool is the right word, but it was cool to see that people didn't really know and that they were interested in learning what goes on. Something that was really cool that we did was an organization that we were working with ran a ad on the dark web for, I believe it was like a 14-year-old girl, just in our city. And within 2 hours, there was like 15 people, I believe. So that really, I think, woke people up.
God.
Yeah.
It's really disturbing. So, yeah. That was sad.
Okay,
But
so yeah.
From that event, what can people do if they want to help these innocent children and if they want to stop the crime of sex trafficking in our local communities and in our cities?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things, like, I kind of advise parents to do is just make sure you are aware of what your own children are doing.
Yeah.
Because it's, human trafficking is one of those things where money's great.
Yeah.
But money's not going to be the solution. The only solution to it is really awareness. Because if there's less kids or less people that can be trafficked because they know what to look out for, then it's eventually just going to kind of die off. Sadly, I don't know if that'll ever happen. But one of the biggest things is just like having self-awareness, knowing who you're following, having private accounts, knowing what to look out for if you're by yourself. Try not to be by yourself, especially at night. So just like kind of looking for the different signs, especially on the online side. Nowadays, I would argue that online trafficking is more prominent now than like in-person trafficking. And there was a stat that I found both interesting and disgusting that if you have like a public account, around 1% of your followers are pedophiles, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you have like, let's say you have 1 million followers, that's what, 10,000 people. So that's a lot.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That's significant, yes.
Wow, that is crazy to know. But I kind of just wanted to take a step back and just wonder or just ask, what got you into this?
Yeah, that's like the question I get asked the most probably. It's one of those things that I truly believe God's placed on my heart because I don't really have a reason. You know, I have my own stories and everything and experiences, but I haven't had anything that's like, you know, I haven't been trafficked or haven't had that involvement. I just kind of woke up one day and I was like, you know, this is really wrong. Like, it's just something that I believe God placed on my heart, which I also think is what kind of fires us all.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's necessarily a desire from me. I think it's a desire that He placed. So yeah, that's kind of where everything started.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, there's movies too, like Sound of Freedom, that also spreads awareness, you know.
Did you both watch that, I'm guessing?
So I actually have not seen
No.
it
Yeah,
because
that's
I just know like I know a lot of the ins and outs, and I'm a very visual person, so I think knowing it versus seeing it and knowing it is just different.
It's different.
But I do want to eventually see it. I'm also just not a big movie person. I'm behind on a lot of movies. Yeah.
I want to watch it as well. I just I haven't had occasion to yet, but I know I definitely should, and I'm a huge admirer of Jim Caviezel. So yeah, that's another reason to watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was definitely an impactful like movie. I mean, you saw it made a lot of ruckus online, and had a lot of people going to go watch it that wouldn't normally.
Yeah.
And I remember walking out of the movie theaters and people were shocked because it is different seeing a visual sort of even though it's make believe, you know it's real. So just having that in front of you definitely shook up a lot of people. But you did mention that there is sort of an ignorance when it comes to this. Why do you think people ignore this?
I think part of it is they just don't want to face the reality. I mean, I think we do that with a lot of things in our society. You know, it's a lot easier to ignore a problem than to confront it. But I also think, a lot of it is just in our society. Our society is very sexualized. And so even though I have yet to meet somebody that is pro-trafficking, just because it has to do with sex, it's a very like taboo thing to talk about. But one of the things I kind of try to focus on too, which is I think an even bigger challenge because of our country's idea of sex, is the relation of pornography and sex trafficking. There was a study done that I believe, I don't want to say the wrong number, I believe it was 71% of videos online, pornography videos, are trafficking related, either through like prostitution or bribery,
or sex slavery.
So I think, anything that has to do with confronting pornography, I think our country is just like hands off because we idolize sex so much and we see it as like a pleasurable thing, which, it is a pleasurable thing, but in the, I guess, confines of marriage and how God's intended it to be. But I think a lot of it just has to do with kind of that I guess view that we have.
Our culture has definitely shifted in the last few decades, where it's just like that our culture is just
And also you have to understand too that the major platforms like Pornhub, I mean, so much of their content, so much of their money is made through these trafficking videos and through these frankly rape videos. And they would take such a financial hit, and you don't know where they are at in the world. You don't know who their friends are, who their enemies are. Like I think when you go down that rabbit hole, you just realize that it's more than just a taboo. It's like, don't talk about it.
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's, the porn industry is like $100 billion industry, which is more than the cocaine industry, more than the private computer industry.
With the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than that. But
That's one of the worst right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Melissa's back on.
Oh, hi,
Melissa, hi.
Dark web, yes, that's very true. And we were just talking about the dark web and how, like, because of the presence of the dark web, like, does the presence of the dark web really stop something from happening legally? Because trafficking, sex slavery, it's illegal, but it still happens on the dark web. But, like, what, should we legalize it because it happens on the dark web?
No. I don't know. I think
one would hope not.
Yeah, I think kind of what I've seen also is, I think there's a certain degree of it that our government doesn't necessarily, like, explicitly, show that they're for it, but we see, like, a lot of the laws. Like, there was a law that was trying to be passed in California that would essentially, it's actually one of my friends from this walk that I did. This law would basically create a lifelong restraining order against whoever someone's abuser was. So if you're a victim of trafficking or sexual abuse, sexual assault, this law would place that restraining order on your abuser. And if they ever tried to contact you or come back to you, they'd be arrested, sent to jail, and they'd also have a fine.
So what happened?
And it got shut down.
Of course it did.
Because from what I was told was that there was another party that came and said that punishment would be too severe for the abuser. And so they shut it down. And then we see laws. One of the laws that passed is basically if you are, I believe it was 12 and up, you go to school and say, you don't want to go home, or you're mad at your parents, or they're not affirming your gender, or whatever it may be. You can go to a government facility. You won't even go home. They'll just take you straight there. They won't tell your parents. And that's basically, that law is making trafficking even easier. So we're just seeing, like, the government, if they were on the same page as us, they would have these explicit laws that restricts this.
Now, Philip, so you do, I know that your sister has her work, but how did you get involved in politics?
Well, I've always taken a great interest in it from a young age. I've always been very much, I guess you could say, an armchair amateur philosopher and theologian, political scientist. My academic passion was history. I graduated about a year ago from Pepperdine with a bachelor's in history, and that was,
Nice.
A subject that, academically speaking, I was very passionate about. But really, in the post-Trump era was when my interest got turbocharged. And incidentally, it was in 2016 that I got out of the Navy, and so since I wasn't in the service anymore, I could be politically active, because when you're in uniform, you can't do that. Generally speaking, a lot of restrictions. But during the COVID lockdowns, the scamdemic lockdowns, you could say I was going to anti-lockdown protests in Beverly Hills and in downtown LA a couple times a week, really often for months on end, because the lockdowns in this state under His Holiness Gavin Newsom, seem to stretch on forever. So I was doing a lot of that. And then in 2022, the summer of 2022, in between two of my years at Pepperdine, I did 2 months as an election coordinator for Make Liberty Win PAC, which is the PAC wing of Young Americans for Liberty. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. And did a month in Rapid City, South Dakota, and another month in Tucson, Arizona. And, since 2017, I've been volunteer activist with the John Birch Society. And recently, and I'm sure I'm sure Terry, your father's told you about it. I've started doing my podcast here, CA Propcast.
Yes.
And so that's been really exciting. So I just kind of been involved in different minor capacities, and it's loads of fun.
And how can we find your podcast?
Oh yeah, well right now the only channel of my own that I have it on is on Rumble. It's the channel is called CA Propertarian. CA is in California, and then Propertarian, and I'm going to be creating an equivalent YouTube channel, as well very soon, and also I'm thinking I'll get it on Twitter.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or X, formerly known as Twitter, as we have to say now. So
yeah, absolutely, and then just from that too, there's Red Angeles too. Are you going to be a part of that as well?
Yes, it is part of the Red Angeles circuit of podcasts.
That's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you have obviously a really long history in this. So,
oh, thank you.
Just what are your top issues that you notice about Gen Z?
About Gen Z, well, Gen Z, what excites me about them is they're set up to be an incredibly subversive generation, and what we need is more and more subversion of the system, or the New World Order, deep state, whatever you want to call it right now, the Great Whore of Babylon, if you will. But what's happening with Gen Z is they're deeply skeptical of established institutions, and even though many of these Gen Zers are left-wing, which is the part I don't like, the part I do like is that, they're deeply skeptical of state power, in the abstract and as a concept, and that they're deeply skeptical of the powerful social and political and economic institutions of this country and this neoliberal world order. I guess the main problematic trend I notice with Gen Z is that Gen Z males are going further and further to the right, and females are generally going further and further to the left. So there is an unprecedented gender divide amongst Gen Z that I think is going to be a problem in the long term, especially in the midst of declining fertility rates.
Now, why do you think that's happening?
It's happening partially because, and this is something that's going to drive the cultural Marxist, feminist extremists crazy. But as a general rule, as a tendency, studies have shown that women are usually more prone to socialization. They're more psychologically conformist because they're primed biologically to seek security, and so they seek security in conforming to a perceived norm. So if the perceived norm of a society, if the dominant culture is perceived as being left-wing or neoliberal or cultural Marxist, as is the case in the U.S. today, then you're going to have that younger generation of women and girls tending to gravitate toward that, a majority of them. Now, with males, what you're seeing is they're moving further to the right because the mainstream media is constantly hammering with a message that they're evil because they're straight males.
Yeah,
they're a patriarchy.
Yeah,
so they're fascists.
Have you noticed that, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, my stance is probably a little more divisive, but I would say for the females, a lot of it has to do with abortion. I know a lot of liberal women that they essentially are only liberal because of abortion. They don't care about any other views of the politician, but if they're pro-choice, they're going to vote for them.
Why is abortion such a strong topic for Gen Z women?
Honestly, I don't know. I think our view of life has just shifted. It used to be this sacred thing that, you're lucky to be alive, and now people are wishing they were never even born, or, it's just, I don't know. It just baffles me. It's one of those subjects where I don't know if I'll ever understand it, because I always try to approach things from the other person's perspective, just to kind of see where their point is at. With abortion, I just don't get it.
Yeah,
I always say if it is alive, if you say it's life, why would you kill it? But we're at a point where people are yeah, it is alive, but I still want to kill it.
Right.
People are willingly admitting that it's murder. But for the guys, I don't know about that shift farther right. My initial thought was kind of just because men tend to be the ones that are, the breadwinners in the house that are providing. And as our society, it's becoming harder and harder to survive financially, I feel like these men are turning more and more right because they're trying to turn more and more towards fixing the economy so that they can provide for their families. So I don't know. I've always noticed, like, I think politically, like, men typically focus more on the economic end, and women focus more on the social end. I think a lot of that is just because of the gender roles and what their focuses may be in a family or in life.
Yeah. So you guys see a little bit differently then, like.
Yeah, if I may, that's very interesting that you brought that up, Luke, because I don't know that there's. I haven't personally seen any evidence that Gen Z men are moving to the right due to economic reasons. Like, I don't think they're necessarily, becoming adherents of the Austrian school of economics or, apostles of Ludwig von Mises and becoming, doctrinaire ultra-capitalists. I think they're being pushed to the right by social pressure, by social and cultural forces, because they're constantly being hammered by CNN and by, social media, and by the New York Times with the message that because they are men, especially if they're straight men, even to an extent if they're gay men, that if they're men, they are evil. They're part of a patriarchy. So I think this is more of a phenomenon of them becoming more socially and culturally right-wing, rather than them adopting, right-wing economic models, in a doctrinaire sense. That's the sense I get. I could be wrong, but.
Do you think abortion has any
Not very much, because at least for the male side of things, because I think for a lot of Gen Z men, given how they're less prosperous than previous generations of men and of people in general.
What do you mean less prosperous? What do you mean?
Well, they're less financially prosperous because Gen Z is less financially prosperous in general than and so are millennials than the boomers and the Gen Xers, for example, because of how our economy is set up right now, all the outsourcing of blue collar middle class jobs and whatnot. So I think with a lot of Gen Z men, unless they're very hardcore pro life, they actually probably wouldn't care too much about abortion, on a moral level. And they might even, if they got a woman pregnant, because they're not financially well set up, they might even, this is a terrible thought, but they might even be kind of relieved if she, quote unquote, got rid of the problem for them, which, that's not a good trend, of course, in the culture. But I think what it is they're so sick of being told that they're evil, and oppressive and patriarchal and racist because they're men, that it just pushes them to the right. And in its extreme form, you start to see an unprecedented percentage of an entire generation of American men and Gen Z embracing fascism. It's nowhere near the majority. It's a small minority, but it's a growing minority. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what happens when you constantly browbeat these guys, with the message that they're irredeemably evil because they're men. Well, some of them are going to become fascist. So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we've all noticed a general shift in basically the way the economy runs, right? Mm-hmm. There's so much talk of socialism and communism. Yep. And speaking of which, I wanted to do a quick recap. We went to a speaking event held by Turning Point, Yeonmi Park. We went to it on last Tuesday.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And we did our podcast from there. And, I just want to recap that very quickly because her message is so much of do not trust the government. The government does not have your best interest at heart. And I don't know, what did you think of that event, Ellie?
For me, I was just fangirling, to be honest. I know I've read her book, and it's something that my family read together. And then we, meeting her for the first time was really amazing. But I think just rehearing her story again, it just makes me sad to know what she went through, but very happy that she's speaking out about what's happening in North Korea. So it's not repeated here in America, although we're going in that track. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, so what do you guys think? Is that very much of a factor when it comes to conservative young man, liberal young woman? Do you think the future of the economy, socialism, capitalism, whatever it may be, is that a deciding factor for these guys?
I honestly don't think people think that deep into it. Like, I'm not trying to undermine, that generation, but I just don't think I feel like a lot of these people don't even know what those words mean. Like we see people at these
Yes.
protests that are like, why are you here? And they're like, oh, we don't know. So
Right.
it's like,
Well, they come because it's the I don't know, the fashionable thing, the most
Yes.
hip thing to do,
yeah,
because they see what's going on in the media and they know their friends are doing it, so they're gonna do it too.
like the black square and yeah.
Just like
Sounds
that.
like hippies too.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
all those dark
I mean,
hippies.
it happened with that too. It's
That's
the
funny.
same thing. It's like they don't even know what was
Mhm.
happening, but it's just repeating itself. History just repeats
Yeah.
itself. I mean,
Well,
yeah.
And you have
We've
to
seen.
understand, too, if I may, for the modern day American mainstream left, that dominated by the Democratic Party and its corporate allies, socialist rhetoric is really, it's aesthetic window dressing to them. They do it to virtue signal, and they do it because they know that the kind of rebellious, vaguely subversive rhetoric, the Che Guevara t-shirts, they're going to appeal to a younger generation. But these people don't actually believe in revolutionary socialism. They use the language, they've co-opted the language of revolutionary socialism to advance a very corporate-dominated, very neoliberal and cultural Marxist agenda that actually doesn't really resemble the worldview of Che Guevara very much. But they do it because they know that's how you attract young people that want to appear subversive to the cause, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and when you hear Yeonmi Park talk about it, she's like, where do you think, like, who do you think makes your purple hair dye? Do you think that if the government's in charge, you'll have purple hair dye? It's going to be cut from the budget, you know?
Right.
Like, so there's so many real world things that, I think a lot of people, aren't considering, and I mean, it just kind of brings us back around to the problem of just corruption within industries, like the porn industry. What do we do about the corruption in like Pornhub?
Right. I mean, she did have experience with that as well. Yeonmi Park.
Yeonmi. Well, what she had experience in is how she was trafficked
Right.
in China, and the Chinese government, very similar to the American government, saw it, a lot of it. It's not necessarily legal, but it keeps the men quiet.
Mhm.
Yes.
Could that be porn in our country? Could that be
It
this
is.
sex slavery problem?
Yes, that is exactly the function it serves. The term that Karl Marx used incorrectly, I think, for religion was he called it the opium of the masses, because he claimed that the purpose of religion was to keep people docile so they wouldn't revolt against the capitalist class. But I would argue that the real opium of the masses are cheap, readily available distractions that are readily accessible to the proletariat or the common folk. And a prime example of that, especially for men and to a lesser extent for women, would be pornography. And that would go in the same category as Netflix, Amazon Prime, although porn is more destructive. But what they all share in common is their purpose is to keep you docile, so
Yeah.
that you're not paying attention to the profound events that are occurring around you, and definitely so that you don't rebel in any
Yeah.
meaningful capacity.
And opium is a drug, so it's like
is.
it's as that's how they stay happy, and
Yep.
that's how they stay docile, and so they're it's mass psychosis,
Yes.
as one would say. Terrible. Now I'm sad again.
It's okay.
No, it's understandable.
I mean, what do we do? Is
Now-
there any
Or-
solution?
I did have a question for Luke. So, being a Christian, do you see what do you see the churches doing to help fight against human trafficking?
There you go.
I wish I saw more. I think there's a similar response that we see just as a nation as a whole, is the church kind of just ignores it. And I don't think it's that they don't care. I think it's just like the same thing. It's easier to ignore it than to tackle it, because at the part of being a church, obviously it's the body of Christ, and they're trying to share the gospel and spread the message, and but on the other half of it, it also is a business. It's hard to think about it like that, but it is, because they got to keep the church running, and so if you upset your congregation, if you talk about subjects that maybe are taboo or might upset people, you might not get as much money, and so I don't know if all churches think that deeply into it, or if it's just a matter of it's a lot easier just to not talk about it than to talk about it. But I do see like churches getting involved, here and there. I think it's also one of those things that, the church is also doing a lot. So, it's one of those things where realistically they can't cover everything. I think maybe I just give them the benefit of the doubt. But, I think it's also something that isn't brought up a whole lot in church.
What specifically?
Just like I came to my church about my event, and it wasn't really something that they have ever tackled before, or I don't know if maybe thought about tackling or whatever, but when I did bring it up, like they were all on board to help. So, if it's something that anybody's like thinking about or has on their heart, like I would bring it up to their church, because it might not be something that they are necessarily like thinking about.
Well, what was the thing that you brought them?
Well, I just told them about my event, and like they were, they helped me a little bit.
What was the event for?
For the walk that I did.
Okay.
For the human trafficking awareness.
But that's, is human trafficking, that's not really controversial. Right? It's everyone is.
Yeah, I think it's more of just like the touchy subject.
Right.
More than like controversial. 'Cause like I said, I don't think there's anybody that's pro trafficking. I think it's just it's a heavy subject.
Yeah, to my knowledge, most churches function under a 501c3, so they're technically not a business.
Yeah.
Right, but they still need the money to flow in.
Yeah.
Well, everybody needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I could see definitely how some churches don't want to upset congregations, but this is when you need to decide whether this is like, are you gonna worry about people upsetting people, or like, are you gonna trust the fact that God has you and that He will provide for your church to be open? And that's something that churches do need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is they just don't know what to do. And that's kind of where like I started working with my church a little bit, and working on hopefully getting some kind of like workshop just to help instruct.
Yeah, that's pretty true. So she did, Melissa's bringing up some pretty interesting points. She says the church is a huge cover, but then she also mentions how many priests have been caught with pedophilia, which is true.
Yeah.
There have been many cases like that. It's speculated to why, because there's so many incidents with priests involved.
Yeah.
So you have any like reasoning behind that?
The only thing I have, honestly, people don't take it the best, but it is just the truth, is that it doesn't matter if you're a priest or not, or believer or not. Like, we're all sinners. We're all gonna have a struggle. It doesn't make it okay.
Right.
But we have to understand at the end of the day, like, we all have a sin that we struggle with. Whether you tell a lie or whether you murder somebody, like, that's enough to send you to hell. And so having that reality and that perspective, again, is not excusing it, but I think it helps to understand that we all just have things that we mess up on.
Hurt people.
Yeah. But I have noticed, the numbers in the church match up very similarly, if not worse at times, to the numbers in general. Like the percentage of husbands that are addicted to pornography in the church is, I believe it's a little higher than those that are just that aren't believers or that don't go to church. So I don't know, honestly, what that reasoning is.
Now, Philip, you were what denomination are you part of?
Oh yeah, I'm Anglo-Catholic or Anglican
Have
Catholic.
you seen any push towards helping end human trafficking within that denomination?
Certainly not in an official capacity. You're right. I actually, and I've attended a lot of different churches. Roman Catholic. I was raised Southern Baptist, and I'm personally Anglican Catholic by faith. But it's not something I see get addressed directly very much, because, like you guys were pointing out, it's sort of hidden in plain sight. It's all around us. We know what's going on. But churches, I think, are primed to address issues of everyday morality. They'll warn from the pulpit against the use of pornography, and also against sins that have always been with us, like adultery, wrath, sloth. The 7 deadly sins, what have you, arrogance, pride, hubris, all of that. But it probably doesn't come to the mind of the average cleric, to use the pulpit as a vehicle to address human trafficking, and maybe that's something that needs to change. You know, maybe it should be discussed routinely on Sundays from the pulpit.
Now, this question for both of you: how do you think we can get more people involved to help with ending this?
I touched a little bit. I think a lot of it is just locally, and I mean whether it could even be personally. Like if you can just educate yourselves and share that with somebody else. Like I always say, something as simple as like posting a video about it on your Instagram. You know, people can start seeing that. The discussion will start, and I think it's really a subject that in a way can unite the country with all the division going on. So I think it really just starts at a personal level, and then you kind of grow from there. And that was kind of the idea with our event, was start in our city. And now I think we have I think there's 6 or 8 other cities that want to do it. And so hopefully it'll grow from there. So, you know, the biggest thing really is awareness. You can also like volunteer, whether it's financially and help support like a survivor's home. You can help, you know, work and whether it's, there's people that are therapists that in their free time, like, you know, they go volunteer and they help these survivors. There's a lot of different things. It can be from the outreach side, it can be from the survivor side, the educational side. I think it just starts with like people wanting to do it and like seeing that it is a problem. Because if something isn't a problem, or if you don't see it as a problem, you know, you're not going to want to do anything about it.
Ignoring it,
Yeah.
And if I may add something, this might seem off the beaten path, but it seems to me, based on the reading that I've done, that a significant percentage of the human trafficking, and including that of children, that happens in this country is done by cartels from south of the border, like the Sinaloa cartel and what have you. So I actually think that it's high time for a military response, you know, from the U.S. to the cartels. And I really think that, you know, this country should declare war upon the cartels and should military force should be authorized to target and dismantle them. Drone strikes and special forces raids, what have you, incursions into Mexico if necessary. And I think if you dismantle those cartels, I think a lot of the human trafficking, a significant percentage of it, would go away almost overnight. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I did, the movie Sound of Freedom did touch on the cartels taking a huge role in that as well. Oh. Well, what did Melissa say? The
cartels work with the military. Whoa, what do you say to that?
Well, I'm sure, you know, no bureaucracy is free of corruption, and the U.S. military is no exception. You know, I was in the Navy from 2012 to 2016, and it certainly is a bureaucracy. You know, so, you know, I wouldn't put it past it for that to be occurring in some cases. But if, you know, if overwhelming force as a result of a policy change is brought to bear against the cartels, they're going to feel it. It will hurt. And, you know, you think about it, Al-Qaeda's top-level leadership was decimated by U.S. drone strikes. So there's no reason, and that was all the way on the other side of the world in Pakistan and Yemen and Somalia. So there's no reason to believe that drone strikes couldn't be used to even greater effect against the Sinaloa and Los Zetas cartels, you know, in Mexico.
Yeah, I do think Melissa brings up a good point, though. Like, what do you do about corruption in the military, you know?
It's very difficult because bureaucracies inherently are next to impossible to reform. That's the nature of bureaucracy. The function of a bureaucracy really is to preserve itself. They have immense self-preservation. Like when people talk about the deep state, what that really is the federal bureaucracy. It's a de facto fourth branch of government and possibly the most powerful. So I can't fully answer that question. But you know, I would hope that, you know, a change of administration away from this current catastrophe, because the Biden regime is an unmitigated catastrophe, that a change in administration to something better would do something, you know, to ease and mitigate that corruption.
Yeah, she says also the CIA and DEA have been caught many, many times with mass amounts of military planes.
They would traffic drugs. Yes, that's true. Yeah,
well, that was a heroin thing, right?
Well, the CIA has trafficked cocaine at various points in Latin America, or at least is alleged to by reasonably credible sources, you know, for decades now. Like, you know, for example, around the time of the Iran-Contra scandal, there were numerous credible allegations of the CIA trafficking cocaine and then using the proceeds to fund the Contra insurgency against the Sandinistas. And as much as I support the Contras and loathe the Sandinistas, I would not be comfortable with trafficking cocaine.
Well, the thing is now they just get it cheap from the south of the border. Fentanyl. It's all about fentanyl right now. Fentanyl. It's because it's made in the dirt in Mexico, right? They don't have to do a plane.
The precursor components come from China for the most part. And then
you think so?
They
are.
It's
so easy to make, though. You make it in dirt.
Well, what China does is they make the precursor components. They ship the precursor components to Mexico, and then the Sinaloa and Los Zetas and other cartels, they assemble them in trailer park
Who's buying
labs.
it in Mexico?
The cartels are. They buy the precursor elements. They assemble them in their little makeshift labs, and then they sell it for a tremendous markup.
Wait a minute. Where are the pharmaceutical companies getting it? Are they getting it from China, too?
Well, you have to understand, I think a lot of the precursor components are actually legal. So kind of like a lot of the precursor components to methamphetamine are perfectly legal. You can buy the ingredients to methamphetamine at your local Rite Aid. But it's not legal once you synthesize it into meth. And so kind of like how coca leaves are perfectly legal, but once you refine it into cocaine, it's not legal. And I think it's the same way with the fentanyl. A lot of the precursor raw materials are legal, but once you synthesize it into fentanyl, it's not legal.
Now, what are these materials, and why are they selling so much from China?
Well, I'm not a pharmaceutical chemist, so I can't tell you much about the materials themselves, but
Dang
I do... right, yes. But I do know for a fact that that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, it's very obvious that they have an agenda in weakening American society and the fabric of American society, the American family, as much as possible. And they do that in some cases with drugs. And another major weapon that they use to do that is TikTok. They promote degeneracy and they promote cultural Marxism, and they promote all kinds of behavioral patterns that would tend to subvert the traditional nuclear family unit. So this is a multi-pronged attack from the CCP, against the fabric of American society, and fentanyl is just one pillar of that, one tentacle.
So we have fentanyl addiction.
Yes.
Destroying the family unit.
Yes.
What's another one?
We've seen recently that for the first time that I've seen in a long time, a significant number of illegal immigrants from China are coming into this country, and we've also seen this has been going on for I think since the 70s. Chinese students on American elite university campuses that are studying STEM, that are here to study, science and mathematics majors. A significant percentage of them are spies, are agents of the Chinese Communist Party.
Are they going into government, or what are they spying on?
They're getting advanced degrees here. They're taking those skills and that knowledge back to China to, strengthen China's economic and military capacity. And China is also perhaps the world's leading expert at corporate espionage. So what they do is they spy on, American Fortune 500 corporations here. They steal our technological blueprints, and then they replicate them in China in violation of U.S. Patent law to strengthen their own military and economic capabilities. So this is a multi-pronged attack. There's a lot of tentacles to this octopus.
No, absolutely. It's funny, one that I haven't seen targeted, but maybe it is Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
You think Hollywood is targeted by China too?
Well, very much so, because you think about it, a lot of Hollywood studios, they deliberately calibrate their content in the movies and shows they produce not to offend the CCP. Like, you remember, this was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, but John Cena acknowledged in public the independence of Taiwan, the Republic of China, and the reaction from the Chinese Communist Party was so ferocious and so severe that only a couple days later, he issued a groveling apology to them on social media, in Mandarin no less, heavily accented Mandarin. But he groveled before them like a vassal before his liege lord. And this is John Cena, who's supposed to be, a manly man if ever one there was.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, but it's his livelihood at stake.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
A grown man crumbles. I mean, Yeonmi Park also talks about this too. They were going to make a movie about her life because she escaped North Korea, just skin of her back, the grace of God. And basically, she talks about how she was trafficked in China after leaving North Korea. The government allowed her to be smuggled out. Like I said, they're letting it happen because it's keeping people docile. And basically, she got a call from the producer, and he said, we cannot do this movie because you're insulting China too much and you're making China look bad. And she said, but this is my story. And they said, sorry, can't do it. So there is something in the funding that's definitely very off.
Absolutely.
It's just extremely disturbing. But I mean, what, again, I know I keep saying this, but what can just the average person do to help with these large issues that, like the Americans being targeted, young men being targeted with porn, young women being targeted with trafficking. What can the average person do about it, just from a Christian perspective?
Well, honestly, this is a personal anecdote. I guess one of my favorite types of content to watch online is pred busting, and there's a pred buster who goes by the name Gordon Flowers, and what he does is he actually tracks down guys who on Telegram and on the dark web are part of, like, say, for example, child pornography rings, and he busts them in public. He gets confessions out of them by just interviewing them and keeping them calm. He gets them to confess, and then he turns it over to law enforcement. And I think watching and spreading around videos like that to everyone just passing it around, I think that is really crucial for raising awareness of how these child porn and child sex trafficking operations tend to work. And I think if we all do that, it's going to result in a more informed populace, and then people will be less susceptible.
Yeah, and big tech doesn't like that, and that's why we need to so support other people who are fighting against this. I mean, whether or not it's you're throwing an event at your local church to stand against trafficking, or you're sharing videos and spreading awareness, So I think those are really good ways that awareness saves lives. Mm-hmm. It does. I mean, even if it's just someone something's wrong. It's your neighbor. It's this person. Awareness saves lives, mm-hmm. and ignorance is very threatening.
Yeah, and I think just going back to the point in the beginning when I asked, why people ignore it is because ignorance is bliss. I mean, the Bible does note that as well. Mm-hmm. And people would rather live their lives without having to deal with the problem. Oh, Johnny put a nice hat.
Yeah,
thanks, Johnny.
We're gonna do another shout out.
Absolutely.
Nameless plug.
But yeah, I guess I don't know how much time we have left. But tell us about a couple of organizations that you know of that are pretty helpful.
Yeah, so one that we partnered with for the event is called IRM, Innocence Rescue Mission, and they're predominantly more focused on the law enforcement end. So they'll provide like local police departments, local law enforcement departments, government grants, or private grants, I should say, mm-hmm. To help these departments have their own resources to help fight against trafficking, because a lot of local departments, especially in LA County, depend on the LA Human Trafficking Task Force. And it's obviously, my city is, I think, 45 minutes away from LA. So if anything happens there, like, the response is not the quickest. So having something in our own city, having the resources, you're able to have a quicker response time, more people centered around that. So that's kind of what they're focused on. It's Innocence Rescue Mission. Other than that, I mean, OUR has always been a good organization with getting things out. I know there's some stuff in the news with people trying to come at them from the movie. But OUR, which is Operation Underground Railroad, is a good organization. And there's a lot of small organizations that I would recommend people just to look up, like, what's in their area. Mm-hmm. Like, in my city, I mean, we have like 4 or 5 different little ones. And I think that's like, those are the organizations that as an individual you should go to, because they're the ones that are always looking for the most help. And they're the ones, I think, that can make the biggest impact locally versus some of these bigger national organizations. I think there's just a whole lot more you can do with a smaller, more localized organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being able to okay, I just stumbled on my words, but yeah.
No, but that's true.
Act quickly. Yeah, there you go.
I love how even going to your local church and just putting like a walk for awareness, or just, it can be that easy to stand up against these awful human rights issues.
Yeah, and I think, you kind of touched on like, how can we shift this back? And I think a lot of that starts with where this country is at with our faith. When God was more prevalent in our country, we still had these problems, but they weren't as big because we had a different mindset on life as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I think, a really big thing that would kind of help with trafficking, although it doesn't seem extremely related, is just our stance on sex. Like, if we can wind things back to sex being between husband and wife after marriage, like that just shifts kind of where your mind is at, and it makes, I think, all these problems stand out more. Like, oh my gosh, like sex trafficking, like that's terrible. Like, but like now everything's so sexualized that they're kind of like, oh, okay, like it's just like they're kidnapped or whatever. Like, I think there's just such a morph. Yeah, like everything's been morphed into just madness.
Right. Yeah. So a shift in like the culture, and when it comes to faith. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Absolutely.
So true. And then Philip, tell us a little bit about your podcast. Where can people find that? And then what it's going to be about.
Oh, yes, you can find it right now under the name CA Proprietarian on Rumble. I'll be starting a similar YouTube channel very soon and posting all the same content there. It's also, I think it's planned for it to be part of the Red Angeles group of podcasts. So I think very soon, if not right now, you'll be able to find them there. And just the focus of that podcast is going to be defense of private property rights, and which is which is granted to all of us by God. And each episode we're going to tackle a different current event or current issue that has implications for that.
That's great.
So.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for both of you.
And
thank you.
And
quick,
you have anything else?
Yeah, just,
it's an honor and pleasure.
RuthlessAmericans.com.
Yes.
Get some of the merch that we have on. I got my Just Pray shirt on. Everybody's been giving me compliments about it.
Excellent.
Okay, now I did want to do one announcement. So Tara and I will be at PolitiFest?
PolitiFest.
Something like that, yeah. Okay. So it's gonna be we're gonna be doing on May 26th. So that's gonna be a Sunday, and we're gonna be on a panel with a few other people.
Yes.
So you're gonna be able to check us out there. But just search that up. We probably will be posting something like that.
PolitiFest.
And where's that going to be?
You know what? I'm not sure at the very moment. I don't know if the address has been sent out, but yeah, we're excited for that.
But we are so grateful for everyone joining and commenting, and those of you who are on YouTube, we appreciate you. We love you guys so much, and let's just keep the conversation going.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Remember to go on our website at 180.shift or 180shift.com or .org, right?
.org.
Yes. And then 180shift is all of our social media.
Yes,
all that stuff
absolutely.
All right. But
all right,
I got
we'll
it, guys.
see you guys next week.
And thank you so much, and God bless.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.